Hello, and thanks for joining me once again, talking about Synapse and Analytics and Azure and all that kind of stuff. And it is big news. We have the early Christmas present, that is, Azure Synapse Analytics is now GA, generally available. That means you can go and use it in anger, you can use it in production, has full support SLA. So yeah, super big news, and again, congrats to everyone on the Microsoft side. There's been a huge amount of work getting that to its current state. So that's bit of news number one is Synapse is GA, lots of stuff in there. We're not going to stop seeing this kind of steady ramp of new features and improvements coming into it. And, it is brand spanking new, so there's probably one or two bugs still left in there, but at least you can rely on it and it will be fully supported. Number two is this thing called Azure Purview. So this is a new tool, now released, now in public preview, so it's not GA, it's not production ready, but it is available for anyone to go and test out. So Azure Purview is the new thing that was announced, and it caught a lot of people by surprise. People were kind of expecting the Synapse GA, but this thing had kind of been hiding around. So what we're going to do today is a bit of an overview, an intro to Azure Purview, what it is, how it works, how you get started with it, and kind of how you should be thinking about it, where it should fit in that kind of Azure landscape in your mind. So just join me, having a look through Azure Purview and getting started. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments what you think, if you've started using it, where you want to use it, what are the main killer features you want to get out of Purview, and how do you see it using? How do you see it using? Yeah, words. Speaking of words, literally the worst name. Purview. Azure Purview. Basically, this thing used to be referred to as Azure Data Catalog Gen 2. And that should hopefully clarify a whole world of things. So there used to be a product in Azure called Azure Data Catalog, and it was very good at doing like scans of your SQL databases and saying, here's the tables, this is what's in there. It didn't understand anything outside of that relational database. So if you tried to poke it at a lake, tried to get it to understand kind of any of the modern data structures, it couldn't really do it very well. And so there's always been this gap in Azure saying, you know what, it needs a good data cataloging, data governance, data classification, and security tool. And that piece has been missing for a long time. And that's what Azure Purview is. So what is this thing that's announced? It's a new data catalog and data classification and security management tool released inside the Azure platform. I'm going to be calling it Data Catalog Gen 2 for quite some time, I'm afraid. But its new name is Azure Purview. So that's kind of where to be thinking about it. It's what data do I have? In this database, what are all the different tables and the different fields? Where have I got sensitive data? Oh, someone's just loaded a load of data into my lake. Just make sure there's no PII sensitive. Has that got anyone's email addresses in, credit card numbers? Doing that kind of automated scan to say, are there any risks with the data that you've uploaded? That's the kind of thing it does. And there's been just masses and masses and masses of use cases for that kind of automated classification that baked into so many different Azure tools. So in things like Azure SQL DB or in Synapse or in various other places, it'll use the kind of essentially machine learning models to go and look at column names, to look at sample column contents, to look at a load of different things to say, you know what, that looks like an email. That sounds like that's going to be someone's bank details. And they've taken all these different products that have been used all across a load of different Azure tech and put it into this one product. So you can say, scan my lake and my database and the Cosmos DB and a few different things. It'll run those scans on a regular cadence, and it will do that flagging of sensitive information, the lineage, attach it to terms, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what Purview is. So let's have a quick look. Okay, so I've got Azure set up over here. I've got a few different things going on. And again, I'll drop a note to the Azure Purview release page. And lots of normal stuff. Got ways of, that picture, it looks very shiny. It doesn't really tell you what's going on there. We'll dig into that. The whole search and way of finding data makes absolute sense. Lineage, pretty cool. We'll have a look at what that looks like. So lots of different features. You can come at this problem from a load of different angles. I think my only issue with it is kind of Purview implies this is just for security. This is how you stop people accessing data. This is how you stop people going and doing things so that you obey the law. And for me, that's not what this is about. So yes, it has a ton of functionality baked in here to help you have governance and control of your data. Annoyingly, it's kind of shifted the focus a little way from data discovery, which is the other thing that this is for. So if someone goes, right, I need some customer data, where do I go to find that? Actually, Purview is a great place to do that kind of data discovery. Where do I go to find out profit? Oh, here are the assets that include profit. I'll go and use that one. That's the right place for me to do self-serve analytics. And the name Purview just kind of implies that's not what it's for. It's for security people only, but it's not. It's for loads of different things. So I'll drop the link into Purview. You can go and have a look around it, do whatever you want. But I thought we'd just have a look about how you get started. So firstly, it is fully in here. We can do Purview. So Azure Purview. I love the icon. I kind of want it to see a bit like blinking and just looking angry at me. So we can create a new instance of Azure Purview. And a couple of limits here. So one, you need to have some resource providers enabled on your subscription. And that's caught a few people out because you get an error and you're like, error? I don't know what that means. So there's a couple of prerequisites you need to have on your Azure subscription before this will work. Number one is the user you're using has to be an Active Directory admin, or at least have full permissions to search and view your Active Directory. So when I first tried this, I got kind of a load of things going, no, you can't read it. You can't see what's going on. This will need access to AD. So it might be a thing that you get your tenant admin to set up to create Purview for you, give you access, and then you do all the setup. So be aware of that. You might get an error. The resource providers, if we jump on subscriptions and I jump on this subscription, I've got this thing down here called resource providers. And that's just, it's kind of like, if you're in a Spark cluster and you bring in certain libraries, it's like, what features, what functionality am I allowed to use in this subscription? So in this case, there is a Purview one. So you need to have that enabled and registered. You also, I believe, need to have Event Hub registered, and you need to have storage. So if you don't have storage, Event Hub, and Purview all registered and enabled on your subscription, you'll get another error when you try and create Azure Purview. So be a little bit careful about that. But otherwise, you should be good, and you can go ahead and create Purview, get a new instance, and where do you want to live? It's going to go in my Synapse group. What do I want to call it? I'm not going to go and create it now. There's only certain data centers that have been enabled for it so far. And that's what we do. So I'm saying I want it in West Europe. It's got a configuration. So actually, if I go to previous, we can step through. We have configuration. So we have some platform size. And I don't have a lot of information about what the capacity units actually are, but it's essentially one of the big things that Purview is doing is the ability to go and run scans and basically just run massive data scrapes across your lake, across your databases, across various things. I'm assuming your platform size has to do with how good is it going and scraping and bringing data back. Aside from that, we don't have any choices about what's enabled. So you can see it's got, essentially this kind of helps put Purview in context. It can do 3 things. Source registration, automated scanning, classification, and data discovery. So going out, connecting to a data source, scraping back what kind of data is included in that source. Business glossary and lineage. So being able to tag various different parts of that and say, when we say profit, this is the business definition for profit. This is the terminology it links to. And scraping using things like Data Factory to say, this data set actually arrived here from this job, from this source, which came from that source system. And doing the backwards, the reverse engineering of your lineage by scraping out ADF jobs. That's another section of stuff that it does. And then catalog data insights and sensitive insights. So basically compiling a load of stats and analytics around all the data that you've got and classified it. So 3 different areas. They're all enabled. You can't disable them in the preview, but it's going to do all of those bits and pieces. Now, I'm not going to go and create that. It takes a little while to create. I'm guessing, given it's just been announced, there's a whole flood of people going and creating their data catalogs. Sorry, they're Azure Purviews. So I created this one, called it Advancing Catalog, Purview. And then we've got the Open Purview Studio. So like a lot of things now, there's a separate studio experience that would go in. So once you've created it, go in and you get this separate Purview experience. So I'm going to log in, again, via the account that's got the full admin access to everything. And we get our homepage. This is our landing splash screen for Purview. This is where we go and start working. So, as an obvious thing, we can just go in and start typing things and let's say, well, here are all the assets that I know. And in order to get there, I had to go and register a load of data sources and perform a scan. So I had to basically kick off something manually to say, go and do essentially a select star from my data lake, from my databases, from all my different places, and then register those assets. And then it does a load of indexing, it does a load of kind of compilation, and that's what allows us to do that. So before you'll be able to see anything in here, we'll need to register some data sources. So we have this register sources. We also have this little button over on the side. We've got sources. So we can go over to sources and we can start creating these things called collections. So I can just say a new collection, and this is kind of like a group. So I want to say this is going to be my test group, whatever. Creates that creates this new collection. And then inside that, I can say I want to register new sources. So I can say inside there's Power BI and a list of my data sets, a list of my reports. I want a SQL database and a list of my tables. I've got data lake Gen 1 and Gen 2. I'm sure we're going to see this list of supported sources just grow and grow and grow over time as we get the ability to add more things in. So then once we've added things in, we then see it like we've got over here. We just see a collection of, these are the objects that belong to that collection. So I've got a SQL database, I've got another SQL database, and I've got a data lake store Gen 2. So in terms of setting that up, I've said I want to connect to a SQL database. It goes and asks me how do I want to connect to it. So which subscriptions are under, get my server name, I'll do one I've already done. And it want to go and connect to which resource group is it in. So that could be my Synapse resource group. Sorry, which collection, not resource group. So which of these collection buckets is it going to be added to? So if I click finish, I then get that new data source and I can just go through like that and add them. And that doesn't really do anything. That's just some super high level pointers going, there's a big source over there, there's a data source over there. It's kind of like linked services in Data Factory, just without the lower level connection stuff. Now, to do anything with that, I need to set up a scan. And scans where we actually say, within that server, this is the database, this is what I want you to look at, these are the kind of objects I want you to go and actually include. And scan is how we get all data registered with these different objects. So I can go in here, I can say new scan. And I can say, so within here, so it's got a list of all the databases that are within that SQL server. And I can choose how to connect to it. So by default, it'll try and use the managed service identity for Purview. And honestly, it kind of wants a lot of permissions. So if you follow the details for, how the connectivity works, so I think there's kind of a little bit of details to go about how to go and do that. It basically says, give it DB owner on the database. And it's like, it should have full access to the whole database. But it's running all of the, essentially, select star from sys tables, from sys columns. It's running sample queries against each of those tables to bring back data samples. It's doing a fair amount of work to go in and do that. So it does need a lot of access. So setting up this as your master data governance control, it's going to want a lot of access to a lot of different things. So that's if I use the MSI. I can also go and add other credentials. So I can say, well, here's a SQL username and password. Here is a service principal. Here's another thing to go and do it. Can I do a new one from here? So if I click new, there's one thing I really, really like here. So new credential, this is going to be my SQL admin credential. Choose how it is it service principal, is it authentication? And whatever way I choose, it insists that I get the password from Key Vault. So if it's service principal, it wants to know you're only allowed to tell me the secret from Key Vault. Not like Data Factory, where it says, oh, you can use Key Vault if you want to do things properly. Now this is going, no, you will 100% use Key Vault to manage your keys. You're not hard coding it anywhere. And I like that. That's great. I mean, and for a data governance tool, forcing you to use Key Vault just makes sense. Okay, so in that case, I'm going to be easy. I've already given the MSI access via Active Directory. Tell it to go and connect to AdventureWorks. It does a quick query and says, here's what we can currently see. Which of these objects would you like to be included in your scan? So I could say, well, actually, you know what? Error log and build validation, they're not real tables. I don't want those included. Everything else has user data in there. Please go and do that query. Click continue. It'll then say, what kind of a scan do you want to do? Now, there's a lot of scans that are just out the box. A lot of scans that are pre-built. So in this case, it's got an Azure SQL database scan that has a load of stuff in there. So what's going to happen in there? It's going to have a load of classification rules it's looking for. So for every single field, it has a thing that says, is this a Canadian driver's license? Is this a Canadian health service? Is this a Chinese resident identity card? And obviously, the more these things that you've got take, the longer that scan takes, because it just has to do so many passes over and over and over this metadata to work out what it's doing. So you might say, you know what, that's fairly heavy-handed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a new scan rule set. This is going to be my lightweight SQL. And then essentially I just get those options. Which things do I want to be turned on? So actually, I'm not going to have Australian or Canadian. Might have a U for now. Israel, Japan, doing those for now. And you can do this kind of custom set. And then you can go and configure custom rules. I've not had a look at the kind of things we're doing for that. But at least we can do this custom subset if we want to try and tweak and tailor what's happening. So I'm going to create that. We've now got that lightweight SQL as a custom rule set for SQL data sets. Hit continue. And it says, how often do you want me to keep this up to date? So bear in mind, this isn't a live connection. This is a periodic polling of the sources. So Purview is going to sit there going, so once a month or once a day or every hour, however often I tell it, it's going to run a fairly deep, intensive scan of these different data sources. And if I've kept all those boxes checked, if it's doing a lot of work every time I run it, I don't want to be running it constantly. So this is kind of like, I want to poll it every week. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe on Monday morning, I want this to go and run, do all of my polling and bring it together. So essentially a scan is what rules do you want to apply? What are you pointing it towards? And how often should it go and scan and keep that data refreshed? So if I hit save on that, attaches that to my data source inside that connection. And then when I dig into my data source, I can see I've now got a scan in there. The scan's not run because it's not a Monday morning, so it's not actually hit its trigger. So what I can do is actually run into there and say, run my scan now. I can do an incremental or full scan. Should it basically chuck out everything and just do everything, or should it just look for change? Anything that's changed since I last scanned it. And obviously that impacts how long it takes. So it's going to go off, it's going to run it, it's going to get a lot of data, it's going to add it into my catalog as this whole array of objects, of tables, of views, of stored procs, of all my different entities. So it's going off doing a fairly deep, intensive scan. Okay, and then when that's completed, I'll have a load of data, I'll have a load of info. So let's hop back over onto the other side. I've got these ones I've already ran. So we can go into my framework database. I can see there was a successful scan. I can see the details of the scan, what happened, how many entities. So it found 17 assets, but actually it found 20, and only 17 of them it actually ran a scan for. I think I turned some things off. And we can get some details. So this level is all about this organization of my different data sources and setting up how often I scan them. And that's about the level of detail I can go here. So I can't really get that much further down. So there's like an edit option where we can go in our details and we can like sort of tweak a few of those details, but it's all about that kind of high level organization. This is kind of like my metadata scraping scheduling pane. So that's what you get in that first sources section. Now in the other part, so we can go and, so Glossary is kind of where I'm keeping my custom business terms. So if I want to have, there's a new term, it's going to be, so I can choose, do I want a default term, which will have a load of fields, or do I want a custom thing? So if I've got a certain kind of metric, I don't want it to ask name, definition, and acronym. I want it to ask for the name, the calculation, and the business owner, whatever that happens to be. I can design my custom forms for these things. So I'm going to have my profit metric. This is the revenue minus costs. I can say this might be called prof. I can add some resources, so I can link off to other documentation and that kind of thing. I can say it's related to other terms. I can link things together. I can have child terms. And I can say, this is the expert. This is the steward. Who is responsible for working with them? So you can kind of, it's basically your data governance, business KPIs kind of thing. So I can work with that and I can kind of have my terms, full dictionary. Again, this is for people to come in and go, right, someone told me I need to understand revenue, and then go in here, find revenue, find the definition, find the owner, and we can try and understand it that way. And then these things we can link to those items. Once we've done a scan and we've said, here's all the fields I've got in my database, I can say, well, that links to profit. So if anyone tries to understand that, they can go to that definition and then find that owner and go and work it. So it's building out the lineage of all these different terms. We've got insights. So based on the scans that we've done, we can see how many scans I've run. We can see I've largely done it across the lake. So I've got loads of lake items, some SQL DB items, some SQL Data Warehouse items. It's kind of just going off and trawling that. Essentially, all of this is just kind of the high-level metrics to what's going on inside my particular thing. So it hasn't got my glossary term yet. Insights look like there's a little bit of a delay in terms of how often it goes and refreshes this stuff. So I've got one database, got a lake, we've got various different things registered. So we can see classification categories. It's tagged 2 things as personal, 2 things as government, 1 thing as system. And that wasn't me. So that's when the scan has worked. It's gone through my data sets and it's automatically tagged those based on that set of rules in that scan definition. So we can start to understand kind of all this high level metrics. We can see what sensitivities, if there is any. We can see it's found, I've got some CSVs in my lake. Hasn't got round to doing the Parquet yet. It'll find Parquet and Delta and JSON, and we'll see how it handles those. Yeah, so you've got a lot of stats, and then everything else is management. So that's setting up those different credentials, the different SQL credentials, what my different scan rule sets are. So we should see my custom one in there, which was lightweight. Custom, there we go. So we've got the lightweight SQL. So all this kind of stuff is to do with management. What are my different classifications? I can create my custom classification rules if I want to. And it kind of feels that there's a load of really, really useful stuff there. I would love to see an icon for browse assets. So I've registered these sources. I've got these sources in there. I can't see what's inside that database unless I go back to the homepage and I've got this browse assets window. And then I can go in there, get my list of everything that it's found and say, okay, well, what was in my SQL databases? I've scanned 2 databases. Good old AdventureWorks is in there. I can see a schema. I can see the objects it found in there. Then I can dig down and actually start to understand things. So it's found something called product category, which is a SQL table. It's giving me some information, where it's found it, some basic things. I can see the parent hierarchy, so where it actually created that object. See the schema, and then this is where it would do classifications. So actually, if we go and pick something that's a little bit more sensitive, let's go for address. Look at our schema. So it's found cities. So it's found that it said that is going to be something that could be classification. We've got some information in there that could identify where someone lives. I think in customer, we should have some other info in there. There we go. Person's name, email address, phone numbers, and it's doing the automated classification. We've got that little lightning bolt. That is we have worked this out using our scan rules, and we've identified that that is probably someone's email address. You probably want to be a bit careful with that. Now, the dangerous thing is, so we can click edit and we can override some of this stuff. So we can say, you know what, actually, they've marked that as an email address. That's not an email address. It looks like one, but it's not actually one. And we can unallocate that. We can change the classifications. We can say that's actually a different kind of thing. And we can link it to glossary terms. So I can actually say in our business, yes, that is an email address. But from what we refer to it, that's actually the customer email address or the shipping email address or the salesperson who owns the email address. We can build out this term of glossary and then attach them to these scraped columns that it's found. We can put in our custom descriptions and we can flesh this out. Essentially, we're building a data catalog. Kind of makes sense. And we can build it out and we can have business owners and all of that stuff. So we can actually get fairly low down in terms of how much detail we're adding here. Now, I don't have any lineage in here because all of this data for me, I've loaded via Spark. So I've had Spark jobs that's running, automatically recursing, spitting out data, landing it into a lake or into a database. And I've not ran any kind of lineage thing here. I can edit the lineage. I don't know how well I can do things. No, that's just editing the object. So I think for now, that's assuming you're using things like Data Factory's copy activity, in which case it's really good at scraping that, building out that thing. And you'll see that kind of the little, essentially graph of how it has got to this point. Okay, so browse assets, super useful for going down that chain. In terms of when you're looking inside a lake, it's taking a while for it to scan my lake. So I scanned my lake a few hours ago. It found lots of things. It's taken a while to go and work out what they are. However, if I'm back in my home area, I can go, so what's actually going to be, if I'm looking for product, I'll get a few different things. So some of those are SQL tables. So actually we get that a little bit bigger. So some of those are SQL tables. So I can see advancing like DFS. That's a lake. .database.windows, that's a database. So actually it is at least searching across all the different things that I've registered. So I can then say, well, actually that thing that is in a lake, what does that look like? And I've got my object, I've got my kind of details. I can see other things in this same hierarchy. So it seems like it's taken a little while to actually work out what's going on in the file system, but it's built all those objects for me. I can go and see this essentially browser of raw down to public. I can see inside there in my AdventureWorks folder. And this is basically just browsing a lake. And I can see all my different folders in there. And then when I get to something like customer, it's got a CSV and it knows there's data in there. And then that itself has a schema. It's done classification on there. It's read and sampled my CSV so it can do classification. So it's doing automatic discovery on top of my lake and on top of my databases and all of that stuff. Seems a little confused when I've got things like this. So I've got my years, my months, my days, but it's actually at least recognized the fact that there is partitioning in there. So rather than going in there and giving me you've got one CSV, this is what it looks like, it said there is a CSV object, and actually that has Spark style partitioning inside there. So it's been good in that it's recognized that actually, you know what, I don't have to browse when I'm going through there all the way down through my versioning through my years, my months, my days. It's smart enough that it recognizes that there is some kind of partitioning structure happening. And so it just presents me customer as one object. Now, it only thinks there's two partitions. I think there's quite a few more than that partitions. But at least it's actually recognized these things in a proper lake style, that it's not 100 completely unrelated different CSVs. It's 100 different partitions of the same data object. So it's good. Definitely good that it's actually sort of, recognizing lake things properly, looking at it as a total data set. Again, doesn't have any lineage. I can build in related things. It's quite nice. It's not on the other side. So if I go up, if I go back, I think, to my home, if I do product again, I've got one that's on, so that was in my raw area of my lake. In my base area of my lake, everything's Parquet. And again, it's worked out the fact it's Parquet. It hasn't gone and pulled out my schema. So it's not sure if it's fully understanding things like Parquet yet. It's noticed I've got Spark partitions. Okay, and actually in Spark partitions, I've got schema. So it seems like CSV it recognized as a top level object. For Parquet, it's gone, that's something Sparky. But even so, I've got my full list of all my different ideas. Let's see, if I go back and I do customer, which we know definitely has some emails and that kind of thing. So if I go find my object, go into related, dig down into my Spark partitions. So if I have a look at that, there we go. So it's done the categorization. So if I'm actually searching for, hey, you know what, where have I got an email address? Then I'd want to see that coming up. So it's got customer specific, and then this Spark partitions is actually customer as Parquet. So it's a little bit weird. It's not doing the full naming of some of the lake stuff properly yet. Again, it's in preview, kind of makes sense. But it's at least it's treating things as properly partitioned. It's automatically doing this scrape on my lake and bringing all this data back in for me. It's recognizing the relationship of, in my account, I have a lake, I have a file system, I've got objects, and I've got columns inside those objects. And it's building out that kind of whole security structure. So what that means is I can now have people going in and going, where across my lake, my databases, my Power BI, do I have the term address, city, postcode? Where do I have an object called profit? And where have I linked that to a business term? Who's got access to these things? Because we're starting to be able to kind of dig down into that lower level control and organization of all this stuff, which actually gets us quite a long way down the data cataloging journey. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a high level view of what this is about, right? So this is about trying to understand across your whole data estate, across your range of databases, dedicated SQL pools in Synapse, across your lake, across Cosmos DB, across all these different places where you can be holding data, where you're holding the same data, where's the data got some potential security concerns and classifications and all that kind of stuff. What are people doing inside your various objects, and automating the creation of that stuff. And it's kind of, for me, the thing that I really like is the fact that whenever we talk about data governance, there's always a knee-jerk reaction to try and make it preventative, prohibitive data governance. It's like you're not allowed to put data in there unless it's been signed off, unless it's been reviewed, unless it's gone through XYZ process, then we'll allow you to put the data there and do some work. And that's just not the way people work. So we're talking about data governance, we're talking about data science, we're talking about ad hoc experimentation, we're talking about trying to understand, does this data have any value? And if you don't know if it has any value yet, and you've got this massive chain of bureaucracy before you can land data and start looking at it, you're just going to skip that whole process and do some data quietly on your desktop without telling people. Whereas this whole scanning approach of going, look, you know what, you have access, land the data there, do the work, and then the next time the scan runs, we'll get a little alarm, we'll get a flag, we'll get an email going, there's been some classified data added, you want to shut that down. And it's allowing people to have the flexibility and the trust to be enabled to go and do that work and actually work with that stuff, and then having the good governance and reporting to say, that's not right, that's the wrong place for it, you can't hold that data there. And it's about having those processes to enable flexibility and agility and good experimentation whilst enforcing good data governance, but not stopping people from doing the work. So that's kind of where Purview is sitting for us. And there's a whole load of extra stuff in there around security, around policy management, around the deeper management of this stuff. And we're going to see more and more improvements in terms of, again, how it understands things like legs, how it's looking at Parquet files, how we do lineage if we're not just doing a straight data copy. There's loads and loads and loads of stuff in there. I am just starting to have a look. So for me, obviously, I do a lot of Spark, doing a lot of Synapse at the moment. And so figuring out how that's working with that. How does it work with serverless SQL? So if I've got a load of views and definitions across some lake data, can I get those views and definitions, or do I have to just be aware of the lake? If I'm saving a load of data into Hive, and I've got my lake with all my different data sets, and I'm saving those as Hive tables and using those in Hive views, can I get hold of that? Can I get this to trawl across? One of the big things with Purview, it's based on an open source data cataloging tool called Apache Atlas, or at least it contains elements of Atlas in there. So we've got the Atlas APIs. So we can extend it. We can send objects to be registered with Purview programmatically, which is awesome. Now, when we've got Hive can have a thing called the Atlas Bridge, and it can ping events over. When we register a table, it'll send it over into the Atlas store. Can we do the same with Purview? Don't know. Loads and loads of questions about how we extend this, how we get it to work well with Databricks, how we get it to work well with the rest of Synapse. There's lots of figuring out how this fits. And again, it's in preview. So we'll be seeing this as it evolves, as it grows, and as we get started. But hopefully that kind of puts it in context. What it is, how it works. We're registering data sources. We're setting up regular scans. We're then going and designing the classifications and the glossary terms we attach to the results of those scans. And we're then presenting that to our end users to be able to discover data, find out what's in there, and then get started on their self-serve analytics journey. Any questions? Let me know down below. Can't guarantee I'll know the answer, but I will be looking at this stuff along with Synapse and along with Spark over the next few weeks and months. Any questions, as normal, let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.